All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today. Great show we got. We're going to be talking about Kodak Black. And listen to me, all you guys know he's a rapper. You know about me with prison reform. Before I get started, make sure you check out YouTube membership program and Patreon membership programs. They're going great. Check out all our merch in the links below. Make sure you do that. Now we're getting right into this interview here. I got Brad Cohen, who's the lawyer for Kodak Black. The Kodak Black incident and how I got involved and through prison reform, and that's what I do on our channel here, is he's a young man. He's been a rapper. Did he mess up? We're going to talk about that. But that's not even the case. The case is what's going on with him. I mentioned in a couple of other short clips and other videos about what's going on and how I know what he says is true because I went through it. Whether it's diesel therapy, whether they keep losing his paperwork or not giving him medical care. I know all about that because I went through it. But I'm going to bring on right now Brad Cohen, who's Kodak's lawyer. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Thanks, Larry.
Give us a little bit of rundown of yourself, how you got involved in the case, and what's just a little bit about Kodak Black for my audience who don't know Kodak Black.
Sure. So my name is Bradford Cohen. I am Kodak's lawyer. I've been his lawyer for about three and a half years. I started off on his first case where he had a violation of probation. He had a couple lawyers before me that actually tried that violation of probation and lost. He was looking at about eight and some change on that, 8 years, maybe 8.3 years on that, where he could have gotten sentenced. I was brought on simply for the sentencing on that case and for the mitigation on that case. I presented the mitigation to the judge and some case law, and the judge agreed that he was going to sentence him below those 8 years, and he ended up giving him about, I think about 280 days, and he already had about 250 days in. So he essentially got credit for time served, and that's how my relationship with Kodak started. Obviously, everybody knows who Kodak Black is. He is.
Well, they don't. Well, we got audiences all over the world.
So some people don't. Okay, I'll take that. But he's a pretty well-known rap artist. He has been called, a genius of his age in terms of that he writes his own music, he sets his own beats. He does a lot of things himself, and he also has a certain style that a lot of rappers try to emulate on their records as well. So that's how I started to become friends with Kodak, and then I followed him through his whole career and other cases that he got involved in. And then there was the second case that came about.
We're going to get into that for a second here, but so now that's how you got to meet and get to know Kodak Black. And obviously, as a lawyer, you kind of intertwine a lot. You only hear the bad parts of people, but you probably interviewed them enough to know there is a good part of them. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. When we talk prison reform, even on this channel or any other channels, prison reform has a lot to do with the system itself, and we're going to go into that. But when we get a young man who here is just a celebrity and he's still getting abused, as I used to tell people, I don't care who you are. I was in prison with godfathers, I was in mob bosses, and I was with professional athletes, and they're all treated like garbage. But some of them find their groove. Obviously, Kodak Black's a young man. He's like, what, how old is he?
22.
He's 22 years old. But what's happening to him is what we're going to get into today. Just give the audience a little bit of this case. Why is he in prison?
Okay, so on this particular case, he's in prison because there's a law in Florida in regards to owning a firearm if you're under 24, if you have a prior juvenile record. That's kind of the start of it, right? So he actually, and the government never disclosed this. It was something that we found out through.
We know how they are about that.
Yeah. So we found this out through investigators, but he was actually given advice by an ex-Miami-Dade police, I wouldn't say an officer, but it was a employee of the Miami-Dade Police Department, and was given the advice that he was okay to go in and purchase a firearm. Not just that he was okay to go in and purchase a firearm, but also that he could actually apply for his carry permit.
And that's federal, correct?
Correct. That's the federal part of it. So Kodak, having that information, went over to a gun store, filled out the application. One of the questions on the application is, are you under indictment, or do you have a pending charge that would affect interstate commerce? He checked off no, because most people don't even know
what interstate commerce is.
Right, sure. Or what charge would affect interstate commerce. So the definition of that question is kind of vague. He checked off no. He was sold firearms, and the allegations are that he possessed those firearms when he left the store. And the federal case is simply that he checked that wrong box off, that he didn't say no, that he said no instead of saying yes to that he was under indictment, and he was under indictment in South Carolina on a case that's about 3 or 4 years old.
So let me just stop you on that point right there. Most people it almost sounds like a mistake. Listen, I understand the law. I did the law for 10 years myself, and I was convicted of racketeering under Interstate Commerce Act, obviously the Hobbs Act. And on Kodak's case, you can probably argue, one, ignorance. I know ignorance is no defense of the law. We all know that. But in this case, it seems almost harmless. Give the gun back. You made the mistake. Maybe a fine or something of that nature. Do you think they went after this young man because of his past, who he is, maybe them not liking, the rapper
Sure.
and the kind of stuff he is?
There's no doubt in my mind. So I did a breakdown while I was handling the case of how many cases they actually follow up on that have errors on paperwork. So the majority of these cases are convicted felons that lie on an application that they're not a convicted felon. What's interesting is during this case, a case came out from the Supreme Court that said, if there is an error on one of these forms or a felon in possession of a firearm, that they have to prove this is not just a general intent crime, it's a specific intent crime, which means they have to prove that he had knowledge that he was, quote unquote, a convicted felon. Now, I'm not talking about Kodak because he's not a convicted felon.
My question here to the audience is going to ask: has this guy ever been in prison? Has he ever been in prison before?
He's never been in prison. He was the longest sentence that he ever received, I think, was about 280 days, and I think it was on that last case. But he's only done jail sentences, never been in prison.
Never been into upstate, as they used to call it, and
no,
stuff. And also, obviously, with the law, you could elaborate a little bit. Mens rea, you have to have intent.
Correct. So you have to have intent. Specifically on this crime, it used to be general intent, meaning if it's a lie and buy case, right? So if you lied on the form, they use that as, okay, that's evidence that you had some intent. When that new case came out, that Davis case came out, saying you need to have specific intent, you have to know that you were a convicted felon, or you have to know that you were under indictment, and that indictment would affect, quote unquote, interstate commerce. In my eyes, it changed the dynamics of the case. In the AUSA's eyes, obviously, it did not change the dynamics of the case.
Did Kodak go to trial?
No. So Kodak did not go to trial. He didn't want to go to trial.
Okay. Did he feel? Let's get into the feel of this case for a little bit. Did he feel like he'd be treated unfairly?
So we
know how they pressure people in prison. We all know that.
Yeah, without disclosing attorney-client privilege, obviously he felt that they were out to get him. I don't have a doubt that, and like I said before, when I did a study on how many of these cases actually get filed, most of these cases get filed on convicted felons. I didn't find one case. Yes, I didn't find one case where they actually filed on someone that said, I'm not under indictment in another jurisdiction. And it's just ridiculous. So like out of like 12,000 cases that get referred by the ATF to the U.S. attorney's offices, I think they actually only file on like such a minutia of cases, like 30 to 40 cases. It's that small of an amount that they actually file on. And there's actually a study done and a breakdown of how many of these cases file on. So do I think that they had it in for him? Yes. I think that from day one, they had it in for him.
And what did he do? He took a plea, obviously, for how long?
So he took a plea, and what's interesting about the plea is, and as you know, Larry, in federal court, it's a score sheet, right? It goes by like what I like to call a battleship grid, right? So if anyone ever played You Sank My Battleship.
We're going to show that right here, guys. Check it out.
And it goes by numbers on the left side, and then a level on the top of the grid. And the higher the level on the top of the grid means more of criminal history that you have.
And they also throw in your PSI. Or
correct.
You could call them PSRs, PSIs. They have different names, which means pre-sentence report, pre-sentence investigation.
Right. So what happens is you have a base level, and that base level can be affected by different points, and that pushes you further down the graph. And then if you have a lot of priors or you have more than 3 priors, it pushes you to the right of the graph. So where you don't want to be is the very far corner of the graph.
Exactly, right corner of the graph.
Right. So those are life sentences. So where Kodak was scoring, they gave him a level 3 in criminal history, and they were a lot of times they over exaggerate those points. So if you have a misdemeanor marijuana case, you get 2 points for that, which pushes you to another level.
We used to win cases in the system by going back into the state cases and taking them off, and then you break down the point. We used to win a lot of 2255s too.
Correct.
Also
so
effective.
we tried that.
I'm sure. I'm sure you did.
So
you're a top-notch attorney.
You're 100% correct. So we tried to figure out if we could go back and get some of those pleas taken back. Most of them were juvenile pleas, so they were too old. The misdemeanor pleas.
And then the judges don't tell you if you do something that's going to affect you in a later date. There's a lot of wording.
And to be honest with you, and I hope that your listening audience also understands this.
Watching and listening. Seeing you, Brad.
Yeah, watching and listening. Most people don't know the law in Florida is if you're even if you're not convicted as a juvenile, you can't possess a gun until you're over 24, and that's nothing they tell you.
I didn't know that either, believe it or not. And I did the law, and I live in Florida and everything.
Most don't. So like it's kind of a setup. If you're a juvenile and you've had a grand theft case as a 13-year-old. Technically, you're not allowed to have a gun till you're 24.
Everybody thinks it's sealed. I mean, it's done when you're 18, is what most people think.
And what's funny is, and it's not so funny, is that the federal government isn't connected to the state system in that way, where if you apply for a gun federally and you fill out all the paperwork correctly, you say that you're not under indictment, you fill it out all right, you're not a convicted felon, they will give you a firearm. And then they don't realize that they're actually aiding and abetting you in possessing a firearm if you're under 24. So it's kind of a really crazy situation.
You would also think, Brad, that it wouldn't be intent again. There's that mens rea. If I didn't know it, how could I intend to do a crime or a violation of that? Very petty. When I found the crime, I looked a little bit up about Kodak Black, and minor kid. To me, it's kid stuff. But then when you told me the case with its filing the paperwork, it blew me away, and I got more into it. So here's another thing. Now we're going to get into why he went to prison, what he got. And he ended up getting how many months?
He
48 months?
46.
46, a little under 4 years.
A little under 4 years. The average for this type of crime is about 18 months. The reason why he scored so high and is because of his priors. So he was a level 3. So if he was a level 1 at the same kind of distance, he probably would have been in the 30s. But the average is about 18 months. The judge actually gave us a slight downward variance on this case because he was scoring 58 or 62, and the judge gave him a couple levels off to get him to the 46 months. The government actually wanted to give him 8 or 9 years on this crime, and they said, quote unquote, we want to give him some tough love.
And they wonder why communities of color, and even regular communities, people of, let's just say, not affluence, are really pissed off at the whole system, because it's, and why I fight for criminal justice is not only the disparity in sentencing, we're going to get into now. What's going on in prison? Give me a quick rundown. I know I followed this case a little bit through my Instagram with my son. Everybody knows who runs that. He said, Pops, you got to check out this guy, this Kodak Black, what's going on? So I did look at some stuff. And when I heard, when he was down in Miami, over in 7 East, I was down there. I was in that building. The Federal Detention Center is in downtown Miami. And there's a big building right down there. And I used to look down at the arena. You can actually out of my window. When I say windows, the windows are that thick. Long.
They are.
So when he was telling me about not getting medical care and how the system works, it totally rang true. That's why, again, I started to look into this case, Brad. And now, when you told me, one, this young man was transferred, and you know how they do that. They take you on Con Air. They pick you up at about 12 at night, 1 at night. They pretty much hijack you, kidnap you. I actually complained to my attorney that I was kidnapped. And they take you, they process you, they do the whole thing, and then they send you to Oklahoma, wherever they're going to send you around the country for the transport, and then they lose your legal work. We call it diesel therapy. And all of a sudden, all your paperwork, all your possessions, everything is gone because you can't travel with anything on Con Air. And now, go into that. What has been going on with him, and where did he end up?
So he ended up in Big Sandy, Kentucky.
Wait. That's a penitentiary.
Yes.
I was in a penitentiary.
Correct.
This kid does not point as a penitentiary in any way, shape, or form.
Right. So I've written...
Got me a little confused there. Elaborate, Brad.
Sure. So normally when you're charged with a white-collar crime, that this should be considered that, because it's a paperwork crime. It's not something of violence. You usually get a medium or a low, depending on your priors. because Miami, and we'll get into this afterwards, but because Miami waited until he pled out his federal case to essentially charge him with the same kind of charge state case.
Usually they don't do that.
Usually they do not.
Obviously, that's a point of, are they really after this kid?
Correct. And they usually don't do that. They did that in this case. He put a detainer on him. That detainer is like another.
It's more points.
Correct.
More points.
And that's how they determine whether or not you're a threat, not a threat. They look at your past criminal history, and in addition to those,
you said he went to a penitentiary.
Yes.
Big Sandy. I know it. I know it's a penitentiary. I have actually know people in that penitentiary. I've been in penitentiaries my life. And here's the thing: they're probably not putting him on the yard, are they?
So right now, he's been actually, this is what's interesting. He's been in secure housing since the incident.
As my audience know, we call, and on this show we call it the hole, but it's also called the SHU, Special Housing Unit. We used to call it the box, the hole, whatever. Go ahead.
So he's been in there since an incident in Miami, and that incident was
it does follow you, let you know, the system. If you have a fight at this facility and you get a shot, they call them, or a incident report, that shot, let's just say the DHO, it's the disciplinary hearing officer, gives you 60 days in the hole. When you get transferred, if you didn't pull your 60 days, you will go to the hole or the SHU in that next prison. Happened to me a lot. And all of a sudden you have to finish your whole time. But go ahead.
So when he was in Miami, he had an incident where even the FBI, who was at his sentencing hearing, the AUSA decided to put the FBI agent on to testify in assisting him to try and get these 9 years that he wanted, which I think was a huge tactical error.
Not in that. That just shows the, come on, we're not talking about murdering somebody, knifing somebody. We're talking about a guy filling out paperwork wrong.
Yeah, so he had this FBI agent testify about an incident that happened at the Miami-Dade Correctional Institute, where she even testified that all the witnesses have said that Kodak appeared he was under the influence. They don't know how he got under the influence.
Well, I
know how. And Kodak says that, to his credit, Kodak's never really had a problem with drugs. It was always, he's not shy around drinks. And that was part of his sentencing as well, is whether or not he can get into what's known as the RDAP program.
Yep. Very well. I helped a lot of guys maneuver into that.
Sure.
It's now, I heard, it's expanded. Used to be 12 months. I did hear it's longer now.
Yeah, so that's the good news. And I think once he gets these detainers off him, he's going to qualify for this RDAP program. The problem is getting these detainers off him because Miami won't agree to a bond, and that's a whole nother story.
Let me back up here just 1 second while we're in this interview. This is good because he has a detainer for the same case. So are they going to try to get him after the case? Usually they handle these cases. In my case, I was indicted in 4 different states and then federally, obviously, through the Hobbs Act and through the Racketeering Act, the RICO Act. And then the states step aside and they give the cases to the Fed. Is the state not stepping aside?
Correct. Actually, it was just the opposite. So the state originally, and this is what's so interesting, the state and the feds got their indictments on this basically the same time. Even though the crime that they're alleging took place about 5 months before the indictments, they waited 5 months to actually get the indictment. And the feds did it because they wanted to arrest him at Rolling Loud. It's pretty known that that's why they wanted to do it. They wanted to make a splash. It's a see me now moment. In fact, we filed a formal complaint against the Miami-Dade police officer who took a picture of him while he was in handcuffs at the police department. They just responded to us that he took that picture in response to a request from the federal authorities, who then took that picture and leaked it to the press.
I was just saying, was it posted?
Yes, of course. It was leaked to the press because...
If this doesn't sound, at least on the face of it, and obviously I'd love to interview the feds on this, but they won't do an interview.
No, and no one wants to look like a whiner or let,
You're not, believe me. When you told me a kid, they want 9 years for this is like, already you got me.
And some people are, and I've had pushback from people that are like, hey, Kodak really should learn his lesson, or the problem is that it's not that Kodak should learn his lesson. He understands that, they're out to get him. and that he has to walk a straighter line than you would if you were just an average individual. That's the difference. So if you get out of line one little bit, it would be a lot different for Joe Bob to get in trouble than for Kodak to get in trouble. But that being said, so the state didn't do anything but just wait for the federal case to be over. Well, how did I know that? They had and what I call a hidden file. So Miami-Dade filed a warrant for his arrest with the clerk of courts. But if you looked up Kodak's name under the computer for the clerk of court, it wouldn't come up. The only way we found it was just by happenstance. It was in a report that Miami-Dade had a warrant and it had a number there. I found the number.
You really are feeding. You're feeding. I won't say conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
you're feeding, which is okay. Yeah. Listen, this show, you're here, and how I do interviews or how I do reviews of shows is I let it all out. I let my viewers decide what they believe or not. And obviously, as a man who understands the law and understands the system and how I was screwed in the system, I see it. And I wasn't celebrity at the time. You know, at that point, I was just a regular mobster. And now, at this point, I look at how they can come after you and get you. And now, let's go, because now he's in jail.
Sure.
Of course, people, and I think I'm going to hear this feedback is, why didn't he go to trial? He's a celebrity. He's got money. He's got this.
Sure.
But what people don't know is even mobsters and stuff, we didn't stash our money. We didn't do a lot of things. And I'm sure, that had a part to do with it. It might have cost him so much money to fight a case like this that he says, wait a minute, I could do a few years. It's not a big deal. But not understanding what's going on now.
Correct.
So now he's in Big Sandy.
Yeah.
Is he on the yard? Yeah or no?
No. He's still in secure housing. And he's been in since September of 2019. So we're going on September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April.
I was in the hole 3 years. 11 straight months was my longest stretch, but I was in the hole for 3 years, Brad. So I do understand that. And here's his problem, and I'll tell it right now. I don't know if that warden is going to let this young man on that yard. Because for secure reasons. Obviously, this kid does not point out he is a celebrity. If he doesn't pay, he doesn't do a lot of things. I've seen what happens in those joints, especially penitentiaries. We're not talking about even a medium, and they get rough. But you're talking about a penitentiary. It's a whole different animal. I was in Atlanta. I was in USP Atlanta when we had 880 lifers and 2,000 inmates. So check that out. You're in trouble. There's a lot of lifers. Big Sandy can be a rough joint. I know about it. And are you pushing for him to? Let's before I even jump to that. How's he being treated in the hole, in the box, in the shoe?
So up until so I saw him when he first got to Big Sandy, Kentucky. Everybody was very nice to me. I met him. It was fine. Obviously,
he was in his orange jumpsuit.
He was in his orange jumpsuit. I haven't had a lot of contact with him.
My ex-wife knows about those things.
I haven't had a lot of contact with him after that first meeting at Big Sandy because then he was, like I said, in secure housing. You don't get phone privilege or video privilege.
Once a month, if they give it you, and I'll go into that in a minute.
Right. And then he got transferred to New York to handle the New York case, which is a whole nother thing because that is another
so he went to MDC in New York?
A state case in New York.
A state case.
In Buffalo.
Okay.
And he was charged, and that's a hilarious case too because essentially he was charged with the same gun that he purchased in Florida. He was charged in Buffalo. The judge in Buffalo was like, hey, why don't we just dismiss the case? Of course, the state attorney
now,
in
these
Buffalo
are all state cases, correct? The other case. So they can't
no
rule
other
20 of them
case.
like the feds. They don't rule. Okay.
No. So the Buffalo state attorney, who, by the way, is running for judge.
Hello.
Right. Did not want to dismiss the case. Obviously didn't want that press that Kodak got a case dismissed. And it really was a total bullshit case, to be honest with you.
Listen, this is YouTube. You can say it like it is.
It is what it is. But he resolved that for essentially time served. He's going to get it running concurrent. I think he got 12 months to run concurrent with what he currently has. So he resolved that case. Then he was transferred back to Big Sandy in Kentucky. When he got back to Big Sandy, I immediately started writing my emails again to the warden. I wasn't hearing back until I started posting stuff on Instagram, His fans started writing, things of that nature. I got a call yesterday, 2 days ago, that I could speak to him on the phone because we have pending legal issues, and there's no way for me to contact him.
Denying legal right. You know that denying counsel is against the Constitution.
Right. And then finally they contacted me and said that I could speak to him by phone. They were very nice about it, at least today.
So let's jump back. When did he get to Big Sandy?
He got back to Big Sandy about 3 weeks ago, I think.
So what is the date?
Beginning of April.
Okay, April, and as taping of this show is April 22nd, 22nd.
Correct.
And you have spoken on once.
Correct.
And does he have other legal pending matters?
Yes. He's got many legal pending matters.
Obviously, where do they stand?
So the one in Miami, we're preparing a motion to dismiss on for various reasons. That's what I was kind of alluding to, in that they arrested him, but they quote unquote didn't serve him the warrant. So they're arguing that speedy trial is not running while his federal case was going on.
I disagree with that.
Yeah, so do I.
Knowing speedy trial, I won a case on that.
Yeah, so I think that he was in the Miami-Dade Police Department custody for purposes of issuing the warrant. They chose not to give him the warrant on purpose because they wanted to wait until that federal case
Does this
ended.
sound like a case of just let's screw this kid as much as we can?
Yeah.
It really does. And okay, let's get back to his safety.
Sure.
His issues at Big Sandy. Are you, as his lawyer, and his family and whoever, pushing for him, one, to get transferred back? The BOP also has a clause that's supposed to keep you within 500 miles of your residence. Obviously, I don't think Big Sandy's 500 miles.
No,
I think
it's about
outside.
1,100.
Yeah, because I was transferred. My Florida address was Fort Lauderdale, and I was transferred to Forest City, Arkansas, Yazoo, Mississippi.
Right.
Obviously, they wanted to just keep screwing me. But the same thing's happening here. What are they saying about that?
They say
safe and secure.
Correct. They send you the same. I mean, whenever you contact BOP, they send you the same essential email that says, like, we have internal policies. We make decisions based on those internal policies. We figure out where it's best to put an individual because of location or because of this. Now, Big Sandy is not just 1,100 miles away, because if it was 1,100 miles away and you're talking about being in the middle of Chicago, I get on a plane, I go to Chicago, I can go see him. Big Sandy is not 1,100 miles as the crow flies. What it is you have to fly into like Louisville, then you rent the car from Louisville, then sleep over there, or Lexington, and then drive 2.5 hours. Big Sandy, when I tell you it's in the middle of nowhere, I'm giving it credit.
I know where it is. And here's the thing, and you know this. They sometimes, first of all, they don't care about you, me, anybody. They're the government, and we know that, and you're in the big boys. As I tell people in my shows and everything, you could compare state and Fed, and everyone says, oh, I'd love to be in the Feds. That's so not true. Feds are way worse because they don't care who you are, how much money you have. They don't care. I was in both, understand it. In the States, you're in your own state, so you might know people there. It's a little bit closer. Everything happens. No matter what, the Feds, when you get to the maximum security prisons where he is at, it's a bad place because there's a lot of violence, a lot of death, a lot of stuff. What I've seen, and I was in a lot of penitentiaries from Lewisburg to Atlanta, Edgefield. So here's another question. So you're trying to get him out. Obviously, have you applied for all through? Have you gone one? Of course, the prison. Then you go to the region, and then you go to Washington.
Correct.
And
so,
you file BP8s, BP9s, BP10s, BP right up.
So right now we've put in an email and a request at Big Sandy. Then we went to Prairie, Texas, which is the next level, and
they're playing every day out. If they got 30 days to answer,
correct,
you're going to get it in 29 days.
Correct. And then we get just a reply that says, "Hey, we make the decision based on what we make the decision on," and that just
things haven't changed.
No, so
that's a shame. It's a shame.
It's a shame because I think that for the crime that he's charged with, if BOP follows BOP rules and they're saying there are absolutely zero discretion, that needs to be changed, because if someone's charged with a very non-violent crime and they have juvenile priors from when they're 12 and 13 years old, and they have these detainers that we're trying to resolve, but it's very difficult to resolve these detainers because, one, the Miami detainer hasn't even been served on him. The warrant hasn't even been served. If the warrant was at least served, we could argue for some sort of bond so that the detainer wouldn't be on him while he's at Big Sandy. But
even though he don't get out, let the viewers know he don't get out. But the warrant gets. I mean, the detainer gets lifted,
and the 7 points gets taken off, and then he'd be lowered down to a medium.
Well, he should be there now. Obviously,
Yeah.
he doesn't point out. Even with detainers, I don't think he points out.
I don't think he does either. I've asked them many times. I filed FOIA requests. The FOIA requests are kind of, it's one of those things that if you don't stay on top of a FOIA request, they'll
ignore it, and then if you don't
as
follow
long as
it,
they can. Correct.
Here's another thing,
Sure.
to give you a little option here. I studied and I became an expert at the CFR, which is Code of Federal Regulation, what they have to do to a person when they're in the shoe. Now, they've came down with law that they do have to follow. Obviously, the CFR's Code of Federal Regulations is set by what laws are passed by Congress. Then they set CFR, and then they get the prison policies from the CFR. They have to take Kodak Black out of that hole. Every 30 days, he has to be mentally evaluated and determine that he's not losing his cookie, so to speak. And here's why they do that. And here's what they don't do. They go around in a hole in the shoe, and they'll come by your cell and say, how you doing? I used to say, get the fuck out of here. What do you mean, how am I doing? I'm in the hole for nothing. You put me here. Or for what I was fighting. I fought the prison. I fought the prison abuses of people dying. So they didn't like that, and they kept throwing me in the hole and trying to shut me up. Kind of what made me think about the Kodak's case. Now, when you're in the hole, they have, of course, they're supposed to take you out by law, take you out and evaluate you. They never do it. And that alone will constitute a lawsuit for cruel and unusual punishment. There are a couple of things. Do you have anything in the pike to go the next steps legally to get either him out of the shoe or obviously you want him transferred and treated humanely?
Correct.
Let's face it, guys. Everybody out there, when I talk prison abuse, this is what I talk about. They don't either follow their own policies, they don't treat people like human beings, and how do they go home at night saying, oh, we're a good guy? You might not like the guy, you might not like who he is, you might not like, obviously, with his music and where he is. Let's face facts. I don't think that he's going to be liked because of who he is. He's a black rapper. And let's be honest about that. So what's the next steps legally with you?
So we have a couple things in the pipe. Like, I don't want to disclose everything because obviously I'm sure there's some people who are watching this thing that are not Kodak fans. But we have a couple things that we're working on, civil and criminal, in terms of motions that we're filing. In the next couple weeks, we'll start, getting those out. And I think that they'll have an effect. A lot of people reached out to us. A lot of well-known individuals reached out to us to see if they could help us at least move him closer to Florida so his family can see him. And also, not to mention, so the whole thing with the secure housing that I think is interesting is he did get a shot for that fight that he got in Miami. Obviously, they also want to try and charge him with that crime, I'm sure, eventually.
Unless there's a weapon involved. And even with a weapon, Brad, yeah. I have not seen, unless someone's actually killed or listen, I've done so many things in prison that it's very hard for me to believe for any kind of fight with nobody dying or nobody really seriously getting hurt that they call an outside charge.
Yeah,
so.
my feeling is that they're going to try to. I haven't confirmed.
Has he been to the DHO?
No, not yet.
Hasn't even been to the DHO on that case?
No. For the shot, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, he has.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so he got the shot. And
did he appeal it?
He hasn't appealed it yet. He's going to.
He has time. It's a time thing.
Correct.
Of course.
He got 6 months in secure housing. The issue is that he's been in secure housing since September. They're not giving him credit from the time that he's been in secure housing from September. No. They're giving him a fresh 6 months. Yeah. So the time he was in from September to now, which is 8 months, he's not getting credit for it.
What a shame. They're really screwing this kid. I mean,
they're doing everything they can to make it very difficult.
I don't think they're going to let him on the yard and here's what their wording is going to be. For the safe and orderly running of the institution. They don't even have to feed you 3 times a day. Legally, they can feed you twice. I love the line, oh, they're supposed to get rec. Every day we give them an hour of rec out in the yard for an hour. And first of all, you go into a dog cage that's 10 by 20, and that's supposedly, it is sometimes out in fresh air, even if it's a screen over it. But here's the case. They oftentimes suspend that for the safe and orderly running of the institution. And I guarantee, because of the coronavirus, they're totally understaffed and everything else, and they're not going to do that. They're just not going to give them their rec. They're going to obviously not give them their razors and everything they need to do legally to make you a human being. And psychology-wise, He is actually a great candidate, Brad, for being released because of the coronavirus, nonviolent paperwork offense and stuff of that nature. Has that been approached?
Yeah, we've approached that as well. We're looking into
not that I could see it's not coming.
We've looked into it as well. And the thing is that and you speak about that, it's kind of interesting because I just did another FOIA request to find out how many people were released from this New York jail where Michael Cohen was released. Because I'm trying to figure. I mean, I have other clients. Kodak's not my only client,
sure,
obviously, right?
Obviously.
And I try to help everybody. You know, I have a client that I represented 10 years ago.
Well, obviously, looking you up, Brad, you're a top-notch attorney in all of Florida. I looked up your, obviously when I do an interview like this, I look who they are, look up the law, look up friends that I know and people in the law. You're one of the best attorneys in all of Florida, so everybody's out there. You need an attorney. I'm sure you're probably on a bar in other states.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
New York, Washington.
There you go. Sure. But so obviously you're learning every day more and more about how to handle these cases. I gave you the suggestion of writing certain politicians and stuff and putting an investigation onto that prison.
Right.
Because that does help, because they hate it. They hate when you are... Because by law, they have to do certain things with congressmen and congress letters and political figures and stuff like that. Even you, legal work, when you send legal work, you know, they have to get it to them. They have to sign for it and certain things. So I'm hoping you're inundating him with legal work. Because you have to, not against the prison.
No.
Because you legally have to, because you have a client to represent.
Correct.
And at this point, how do I tell my audience how can we follow this case more?
Well, I always give updates on my Instagram. I try to let everybody know because
your Instagram's below you. We're going to put that there.
I try to let everybody know what's going on the case, not just his case, but other cases as well.
Check out Brad if you want his contact information or his Twitter or anything. Just in the links below, everybody.
And you know, I know he has a lot of fans, and people want to know what's going on with him. So I always.
And who's the fans you got? I did read Jay-Z's involved. I read some other big people involved.
There's some big people that have contacted me that have asked if they can help, and like we're just trying to organize it so that it comes out the best way possible. And by the way, and like when we discussed this originally, when you said like, hey, a lot of people just know what they read about Kodak, they don't know Kodak as well as I know Kodak, and I can tell you like, you know, what you read about someone, what is on paper, and this goes for any defendant. The defendants are not what's on the paper. Like everybody's a person, you know. And when you start talking to these people, when you start finding out what makes them tick, like it's amazing. And he does things anonymously. Like he's donated masks anonymously. He's done all these things anonymously that he doesn't even want me to say where, when, how. He pays for funerals. He pays for police officer funerals. He donates to fallen officer funds. All these things.
I'm so glad you got that out there.
And the thing is, and he doesn't ever want to take credit for that stuff. The only time it ever comes out in the press is either I force him to say, hey, listen, like, you got to at least tell people the good that you're doing because they're only getting one side of who you are.
As I tell people, Brad, you know, every person in prison has a mother, a father, a sister, brother, or they are a father to somebody, so they have a daughter or a son or somebody out there. It's a human being.
Right.
Did people make mistakes? Are people perfect? We all know they're not. I obviously made my mistakes. I talk about it all the time on this channel. And everybody who writes me and emails me has a story like that. And to see somebody getting this kind of treatment is really so un-American. And as I say all the time on this channel, this prison system and this criminal justice, we need it so bad because you're seeing no matter how much money you have, no matter how much celebrity you might have, you can run into the wrong people and boy, they're going to ruin your life. And if it was not for attorneys like Brad and people like myself who are trying to fight for those things, it doesn't get out there and they keep putting their foot on your neck, as we used to call it. And we used to fight from inside, but we had such a small voice. But with guys like Brad and attorneys like that and Glenn Rotterman and guys like I know, those are the people that are going to fight for us and do the right thing by people. So Brad, in closing, what do you want to say?
Just that, you know, in this case, in Kodak's case, I really feel that, you know, everyone deserves a fair shake. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly. And it's not that, you know, someone whines about someone complains about it. It's the system overall. We're not just looking at Kodak's case in an enclosed box. It's how everyone should be treated. Everybody should be treated with a level of respect. They should be offered sentences that are reasonable for the crimes they commit, and that's all that really should be done on these cases. You know, the federal system works in a way that it works, and sometimes it's not the most perfect system in the world. I'll be first to stand up and say it's not the most perfect system in the world, but there's discretion that's built in that can be used.
Blakely versus Washington.
Right, and
I won a case during when I was in there.
So you know,
sentencing guidelines are not mandatory anymore.
Right.
I won that. I used
Booker.
I use those cases, absolutely.
So, you know, we all know that there's discretion that's involved. And it's not just discretion on the judge's part. It's also discretion on a U.S. attorney's part, on the AUSA's part. Like,
those are the people who, in my mind, are the ones who have untethered power right now.
Well, they just need to take looks at a case. They need to take a look at the case and really weigh out what it is. Take a look at the person, see the person in the whole picture. Don't just rubber stamp it and say, hey, he scores 48 months. I'm going to give him 25% off, and that's what I'm going to do, and blah, blah, blah. Don't have any set things like that. Actually take a look at it.
There's an old saying, and I debate this. I have a lot of judge friends now, and we'll golf and we'll do things, and I always tell them, listen, the problem with the prosecutors, ASA or state or whatever, it's not about winning and losing for them. It shouldn't be. But a lot of them it is.
Right.
It shouldn't be about getting a fast sentence and protecting society. Listen, I'm the first to say I deserve to be in prison. I went to prison for a long time. I was a wild guy. But, you know, people change. So, and then when you look at this young man at 22 years old, you're putting such a hardship on his life. I want him to make it out of there. And I want him to come out of there better than he went in. And this is not how you do it. No. We know that.
No, that's not how you do it. And I do want to tell you, you know, his judge in this case, Judge Moreno, was actually, he went out of his way, I think, to be as fair as he could, given the circumstances that the
and know what he
knew.
You know,
and knew what he knew.
That's why I said a lot of times I don't blame the judges.
No,
or the juries. I blame the prosecutors, who I think, especially federal, that have untethered power. I mean, and discretion to do whatever they want, whether it's wiretaps and this, and we all know about what's going on about that and around the world. So I want to make sure our audience knows all about Kodak Black. Brad,
thank you so much, Larry.
I want to thank you, man, for coming here and talking about this case in such a positive way and showing that people do change, and let's hope he does change his life. And let's get him out alive. Keep fighting for him, Brad. I want to thank you very much for doing this. Ladies and gentlemen, man, just check it out. You can go to Brad's Instagram, follow the case there. It's in the links below. Make sure you check out our membership programs. Keep up the emails. Keep up all the communications with everybody. A lot of respect for everybody out there. This is what we're here for. When we hit that 1 million mark, we're going to really do something big. All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a great day. Stay tuned. Follow the case. Larry out.